Now, just to give you a little bit of idea about how common this theme is that Trump sounded, not just going back to the war on terror, but even back to the war in Vietnam, I want to show you the lyrics, some of the lyrics of the 1963 song written by Bob Dylan, who came from the counterculture of the 1960s, was a person of the left. He was an opponent of the Vietnam War and wars in general. And his song was called Masters of War. And here's just some of the relevant text that basically is actually more aggressive than anything Trump said, but it sounds the same themes. Quote, "You that hide behind walls, you that hide behind desks, you that never done nothing but build to destroy, you play with my world like it's your little toy. You fasten all the triggers for the others to fire. Then you sit back and watch when the death count gets higher. You hide in your mansion while the young people's blood flows out of their bodies and is buried in the mud. And I hope that you die, and your death will come soon. I'll follow your casket by the pale afternoon, and I'll watch while you're lowered down to your deathbed, and I'll stand over your grave till I'm sure that you're dead." And that was left-wing politics in the 1960s, and it was also left-wing politics in the 1980s under Reagan, and especially under the war on terror. Now, I just want to show you a couple more things, because I believe we have Darren Beatty here. But as I said to you before, this theme that Trump sounded, and this is what amazed me, is I really started paying attention to online political discourse when the blogosphere, as it was called, it was a pretty cringy term, but that's what it was called, emerged, both the liberal blogosphere and the conservative blogosphere. The liberal blogosphere was stronger because they were reacting to Bush and Cheney and to the media's support for the war on terror. There was nobody really opposing it, and they created this blogosphere, just sort of ordinary people who were screaming into the void, and they found a big audience. And I watched so many of them. I remember so clearly, I was reading them before I started even writing about journalism myself. I remember all day, every day, they would call Dick Cheney a Chickenhawk, say that if George Bush and Dick Cheney and neocons want all these words, they should go fight in them. Exactly what Trump said about Liz Cheney. They were saying it every day. I bet you they wrote more than 100 articles about it over the years. And so many of them today spent the day claiming that when Trump said exactly the same thing about Liz Cheney, he was somehow advocating her execution. Here in 2004, as the country was heading into the 2004 campaign when George Bush and Dick Cheney were running for re-election, and the Democrats had nominated John Kerry, who, unlike Bush and Cheney, actually fought in a war in Vietnam. The headline was, "Military service becomes issue in Bush-Kerry race." Quote, "The contrast could not be more striking. In March 1969, John Kerry, a 25-year-old Navy lieutenant, reached down from the boat he was piloting in Vietnam's treacherous Bay Harbor River, and in a spray of enemy fire pulled a soldier out of the water to safety. For his valor, Mr. Kerry won the Bronze Star with a Combat V and his third Purple Heart." That very same month, George W. Bush was on far safer ground in Valdosta, Georgia, learning to fly fighter jets for the Texas National Guard, a coveted post that greatly reduced any risk that he would be sent to Vietnam, and one that he might not have obtained had his father, who ended up running the CIA and being president, but at the time he was a member of Congress. Mr. Bush went on to miss a number of National Guard training sessions, although his spokesmen say he made up the dates, and his records show he was honorably discharged. Democrats, who this week accused Mr. Bush of being AWOL from the National Guard, are using it as a weapon to undermine Mr. Bush's greatest electoral strength, his record of national security after the September 11, 2001 attacks. Now, I mentioned the aforementioned Jonah Goldberg, who was on CNN today interpreting all of this as a call for Liz Cheney's assassination. Back then, Jonah Goldberg, one of the things that he wrote that made him this symbol of cowardly Chickenhawk neoconservatism was he was, in his middle 30s, he was cheerleading every war, the war in Iraq, the war in Afghanistan, advocating that we do regime change in Iran, Guantanamo, the whole thing. And then he actually wrote an article where he favorably quoted an old neocon, Michael Ledeen, who has since died, where Michael Ledeen said, and I'm quoting almost verbatim, "Every once in a while, the United States has to pick up some crappy country and throw it against the wall to prove to the world that we are serious and we mean business." That's what Jonah Goldberg was advocating. Yeah, we got to pick these countries up, some crappy country, just throw it against the wall, just to show we mean, like, bomb it, just kill some of them, just to show the world we mean business. And obviously, in response, huge numbers of people, mostly liberals, were saying to him, why don't you go do that? Why don't you pick up a rifle? Let's give you a rifle, as Trump said about Liz Cheney. Let's go send you. And so here was his answer to all of these attacks on him for that in January of 2005 when he was at the National Review. He said, every now and then, and again, here's actually, I'm sorry, this is where he said the quote, every now and again, the United States has to pick up a crappy little country and throw it against a wall just to prove we are serious. And then in response to all of these criticisms, like, hey, why don't we give you a rifle? He said the following, quote, as for why my sorry ass isn't in the kill zone, lots of people think this is a searingly pertinent question. No answer that I could give. I'm 35 years old. My family couldn't afford the lost income. I have a baby daughter. My ass is sorry, or a few ever seem to suffice. But this Chickenhawk nonsense is something that's been batted around too many times to get into again here. So his excuse for why he doesn't go throw these countries against the wall was his family couldn't afford the lost income. He was writing books, bestseller books, making millions of dollars. He had a young daughter. He was 35, as though that's too old to fight. Every single person in the military could have used those excuses. This is who neocons are, and always have been and still are, and that's what Trump was attacking. My former colleague and friend, Lee Fong, who's been on our show many times, recently was in a debate hosted by Barry Weiss and the Free Press with two classic neocons, Bret Stephens, who's a columnist of the New York Times, and Jamie Kirchick. Both are totally standard neocons. Neither of them have ever fought a day in the military. They all cheer every single war, the one that Israel's fighting in Gaza. They want regime change in Iran, the Iraq war, all of it, the whole litany. Like Liz Cheney, like Jonah Goldberg. And they were debating whether or not the United States should continue to police the world with its military force. And this was Lee's question to them, and you'll see how they react.
This country has an all-volunteer military. There's no draft. People join the military and they're proud of their service.
Yeah, you know
and
why
that kind of argument is really low.
Yeah.
Because these people choose to do what they're doing. We don't have a draft.
They choose to do what they're doing because they have no economic choice.
Well, then that's another debate, Matt. That's another debate. We're not debating that.
Why aren't you fighting, Jamie?
I'm too old at this point.
Are you? Oh, you're not.
I'm 40 years old.
You've changed. Not that long ago, although a little while ago, you were asked by the AP at a pro-Iraq war rally that you organized.
When I was in college.
Would you go serve? You said, I can't serve right now. I'm in college. Now because you're too old, you won't serve? I mean, come on, Jamie.
We also have a civilian-controlled military. So I don't know who you expect to be calling the shots here.
Look,
I'm a civilian. I'm an American citizen. I have just as much a right as anyone else in this room to offer their opinions on foreign policy. It sounds like you guys want a militarily controlled government.
No, I just want some consistency, some skin in the game. I remember 4 years ago
only people who serve in the military can have an opinion on foreign policy?
Can I say something? 4 years ago, we saw academics and NGO liberals encouraging young people to go out and riot and commit violent crime, knowing that they wouldn't be impacted. It was young people who would get arrest records, who could ruin their lives. I mean, that disgusted me, to see people urging others to be in harm's way. It's the same dynamic here. If you feel so strongly about war, about fighting these enemies abroad, I mean, I don't think it's that much for Matt or others to ask for putting some skin in the game. And you're not that old. In Ukraine, they're now relying on.
They're trying to tell you look really excellent.
Look at the people fighting in Ukraine now. They're forcing conscripts who are in their late 40s and 50s to fight in the trenches.
They're fighting a war of their survival.
Well, I'm just saying, you're not too old. You can serve.
Sorry, can I just say?
I mean, you see, this is who they are. Now, Lee's lucky that he's not running for president on the Republican ticket, because if he were, he would be widely accused by the Democratic Party and the media of having called for the execution of those two little neocons on the stage who have cheered wars their entire lives going back to their early 20s without ever getting near a war zone. I'm very glad Trump said what he said. I think we need that exact statement to be said a lot more, to demand all these people in Washington who want to keep sending young people to war. And as you saw from the Bob Dylan song, this has been going on since the 1960s, that if you want to go fight war, pick up a rifle. We'll give you a rifle. We'll give you whatever, a machine gun. and you go to the war zones. And that way you can see what war really is. You can see what happens to the people you're sending, how you devastate their families, how you devastate and destroy these countries, how you kill huge numbers of civilians. It looks a lot different when you go and fight it than when you're sitting in your think tank or your ornate office in Washington, treating it like a little chessboard, a little game. And I'm glad Trump said that. I hope he keeps saying it. It's absolutely true about Liz Cheney and all of these types of people who are now the main surrogate for Kamala Harris's campaign. But I'm also glad the media reacted as they did, because every time they do this, I think the tiny little bit of credibility they have left dissipates even further. They're just outright liars. And it's amazing. It's not like in passing. They made the whole day about this, with graphics on the screen and all kinds of pronouncements, and Kamala Harris saying this makes him unqualified, and Liz Cheney saying, yeah, he wants to kill me. This is what dictators do. They kill their political opponent. They invented this out of whole cloth. Obviously, you know, in 2020, in the week heading up to the election, they did the same thing. There was reporting on the Biden family that could have been incriminating about Joe Biden and his attempts to profiteer in China and Ukraine, and they invented a lie then, too, that this was Russian disinformation, when in fact the documents were authentic all along. In 2016 is when they concocted the Russiagate fraud that Bob Mueller was unleashed for 18 months in order to find evidence for, and he came back and he said we couldn't find it. So the media just, they're absolutely willing to sacrifice whatever tiny little credibility they have left in pursuit of their only real goal, which is to ensure that the Democratic Party's candidate wins the election and the Republican candidate, Donald Trump, and his movement are defeated. That's all they care about. They're pure political actors, and they will absolutely flagrantly lie deliberately in order to accomplish that. And they showed that yet again today in one of the most vivid expressions in a long time. Thanks for watching this clip from System Update, our live show that airs every Monday through Friday at 7 p.m. Eastern, exclusively on Rumble. You can catch the full nightly shows live or view the backlog of episodes for free on our Rumble page. You can also find full episodes the morning after they air across all major podcasting platforms, including Spotify and Apple. All the information you need is linked below. We hope to see you there.